World War III's coming. The Chinese government has refused to acknowledge Taiwan as an independent country. President Xi Jinping says that the Chinese military will take back the island nation. The Taiwanese government says they won't go down without a fight. And if it's a fight they want, it's a fight they're getting. Things are heating up in Southeast Asia. Now, the largest U.S. aircraft carrier was just spotted near the Chinese border. What does this mean for rising tensions between the two, and how is the U.S. involved? Let's find out. Let's rewind a bit. Some 6,000 years ago, yes, that's as far back as this thing goes, Chinese fishermen made their way off the mainland to settle in one of the many islands in the Pacific Ocean. Most of them chose Taiwan. The island country holds great strategic importance. It lies in the South China Sea, some 2,000 kilometers away from Japan. In fact, indigenous settlers in the region made a living by trading with Japan. Taiwan was still considered an extension of mainland China for most of its earlier years. In 1683, during the Qing dynasty, Taiwan gained more significance. Rulers understood that they could keep control over Taiwan by force. Still, it was a safer bet to ban mainland Chinese folk from migrating to the island country. The population of Taiwan shrunk to 50,000, with 10,000 of them armed troops. Then, rulers realized that Taiwan had the potential to support rice and sugar farms. Factories began sending people over to boost its economy. Mainland China received a larger cut of the profits, though. Following the events of the First Sino-Japanese War, Taiwan came under Japanese control. Now, while the Japanese forces treated indigenous Taiwanese people as second-class citizens, they also boosted Taiwan's natural resources, built railways, and factories. Fast forward to 1945, and a key player in Taiwan's history comes to the scene, the Republic of China. Enter the Xinhao Revolution. The ROC took control of mainland China. Following the events of the Second World War, they took control of Taiwan too. Today, Taiwan is still listed under the ROC's rule. So, for a long time, Taiwan wasn't on anyone's mind. When early settlers came here, they lived without trouble for years. When the Qing dynasty started, they didn't bother much with Taiwan. When the Japanese took control, they did what any nation would. Things changed in 1949. So what's the problem then? You see, the ROC and the PRC, that's the People's Republic of China, are two separate entities. The ROC started in 1912, whereas the PRC started in 1949 under Mao. When the PRC came into power, they claimed that Taiwan belonged to them. Taiwan, for its part, refused to become part of the PRC. According to the Taiwanese government, they're still under the ROC. When General Mao gained control of mainland China, many fled. Chiang Kai-shek and 2 million nationalists migrated to Taiwan to start a new life there. China had another reason to take over Taiwan too, the United States. If China takes over Taiwan, they'll gain control over the South China Sea. This means they can take over trade routes by one of the U.S.'s allies, Japan. Not only that, but experts believe that China's takeover could leave U.S. states, such as Hawaii, open for attack. How have things changed since 2022? The Chinese government opposed the U.S. House of Representatives Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in 2022. They called it extremely dangerous. China began military exercises like firing of ballistic missiles, focused on 6 danger zones around Taiwan, 3 of which overlap the island's territorial waters. Taiwan said the move, which forced ships and planes to find routes around those areas, violated its sovereignty and amounted to a blockade. The Chinese military has also sent military aircraft into Taiwan's air defense zone. Incoming flights must be scheduled, identified, and given permission by the Taiwanese government. China ignored Taiwanese protocols. This wasn't an isolated case. In 2021, Taiwan's military general said that a total of 56 incursions had taken place in a single day. He claimed that tensions between the feuding nations were at an all-time high. After global pressure, Chinese aerial incursions were reduced. By 2022, only 22 such incidents were reported altogether. China then declared that the South China Sea came under their governance. This meant that the Chinese Coast Guards could onboard and inspect any vessels, obviously targeting Taiwanese trade ships. The Taiwanese government announced that China Coast Guards were acting immaturely. They said they'd refuse permission to onboard their ships for inspection. This irked the Chinese government even more. Using force, if necessary. In 2021, Chinese President Xi Jinping said that reunification will be achieved. He said that the entire process would be carried out as peacefully as possible. Yet he said that the Communist Republic has a tradition of using force, if necessary, when things get out of hand. The Taiwanese government announced that the future of Taiwan rested in the hands of the Taiwanese public, and not an outside militia. Studies show that 64% of Taiwanese people believe that China would never actually use its military to take over Taiwan. For the most part, the Taiwanese public is unbothered by the Chinese takeover. This is in part due to the U.S.'s backing of the island state. Plus the fact that Taiwan is building a strong economy for itself. The semiconductors used in every device on the face of the earth have a Taiwanese emblem on it. Taiwan might spread across a few thousand square feet with a smaller population in comparison, yet the country has progressed tremendously since 1949. Things are changing with their global presence and strong economic ties. A large number of people living in the island territory have started calling themselves Taiwanese natives. They're abandoning any semblance of their Chinese heritage. Xi Jinping refuses to acknowledge this as anything other than Chinese men and women living on one of their island territories. When air incursions were at an all-time high, the Chinese president claimed that all attempts at Taiwan gaining formal independence would be smashed. By October 2021, Mr. Xi calmed down a bit and claimed that he aspired to bring back Taiwan as peacefully as possible. According to the PRC, Taiwan's ownership was effectively transferred to them once the Chinese imperial dynasty fell. In response, the Taiwanese Mainland Affairs Council asked China to stop its provocative steps of intrusion, harassment, and destruction. The United States knows whose side they're on. Currently, only 13 states, including the Vatican, accept Taiwan as a separate state. China and the U.S. have never had the best relations. You're either on one team or the other. When Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen had met with the White House Secretary of State, things started to look bad. Beijing decided it was time to show the two could come in and take Taiwan if they wanted to. The Communist Republic decided to send warships, including aircraft carriers, into the South China Sea right near Taiwan, effectively encircling the country. This was largely considered a power move. China conducted military testing around the area to intimidate the Taiwanese government. So, with naval power, aircraft technologies, and cyber attacks on their side, who do you think would win? It's not much of a debate about who'd win if the two countries were to ever go to war. China does, after all, have the second highest military spending of any country. The first is the United States. Until 2022, Washington claimed strategic ambiguity when it came to the Taiwanese conflict. That is, the White House refused to acknowledge they were on either side. Still, it was clear whose side they were on. The U.S. sells arms to Taiwan, they hold meetings with their military, and have strong diplomatic ties. Everything changed in 2023. China decided to up their antics. Then the White House decided they needed to show more open support to the Taiwanese people. Despite their support for Taiwan, the U.S. is not one of the 13 states that recognize Taiwan. In fact, under the One China policy, they consider Taiwan to be a province of China. The United States is seesawing between the two. Despite the heightened tensions between China and Taiwan, the only time things escalated to the brink of war was back in 1996, when the Chinese military tried to disrupt local elections in the island territory. China decided to carry out missile testing on the day of the election to intimidate Taiwan, and the United States had to send in carrier aircraft to dissuade the Communist Republic from taking things too far. President Joe Biden claimed that he discussed the Taiwan agreement with President Xi, and the two nations decided to uphold the agreement commonly known as the One China policy. So what is the One China policy? The policy is a diplomatic acknowledgement whereby the U.S. recognizes the Chinese government as the sole government in that region. This came about during President Jimmy Carter's term, where after the U.S. Embassy in Taipei was closed down. Still, there's more to it. You see, the policy is different than the principle that the Chinese government has outlined. According to the One China principle, Taiwan will eventually be reunified with the mainland. The policy, on the contrary, states that the U.S. will only officially deal with China. However, they're fully allowed to have unofficial diplomatic ties with Taiwan. In fact, under the Taiwanese Relations Act, the U.S. government announced that they'd protect the island territory from any threat to their autonomy. In not so many words, the U.S. will be on Taiwan's side should China ever go to war. Historically, China's made a huge fuss during Taiwanese elections or when they're celebrating local holidays. With the next one coming up in a few months, could that be when they attack? It's unclear for now, but world powers can't dismiss the possibility. China does have a history of taking anything they want. They're considered one of the strongest nations in the world with one of the strongest militaries. They've won wars before and they've done it all on their own. The United States might have taken a backseat for now, but they'll have to pick a side sooner or later. Besides just them, whose side would other world powers be on? China has, for a long time, isolated itself from most of the world. For now, the real question is, will China ever officially declare war on Taiwan? And, if a war ever starts, whose side would the United States be on? Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out some of our other videos, and we'll see you back here soon.